to have you with us in the Monday edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, tonight we focus on a crucial issue in our country that barely ever makes it to the national news prime time, but it should. The fact that child marriages still take place in our country is no secret. It's not shocking. It's a constant battle year after year. We hope at least that as we develop, as we become part of New India, that at least in 2020, this is lesser of a menace and issue than it was decades and centuries ago. Unfortunately, the story that we have for you tonight shows us that the truth is the other way around. And this seems to be the hidden impact of coronavirus and the lockdown. We will explain to you what the connection is. Let me just give you the basic facts to begin with. This is what we have found out and dug up. There has been in the state of Maharashtra, just in the state of Maharashtra, where Mirror now did a detailed analysis, a 78% increase in child marriages this year until the month of September. In fact, there have been about 138 cases reported. These are the ones that were reported just in the last 3 months in one state, across 17 different districts. If you see, there were only 76 cases till June, and then it directly went up, spiked up. This is something that the state and the central government are aware of. That the Women and Child Development Ministry, in fact, has managed to intervene and stop some of these marriages. The local administration is also working very actively on this aspect. But it's a huge socio-economic issue that should be a big concern for us. Little girls, minors, teenagers are being made child brides in our country. And this is an impact of the struggles that poor families are going through during the lockdown. Not just this, the fact that we are witnessing a rise in child marriages, a spike in fact, in some parts of our country, specifically in Maharashtra, comes at a time when we know that the center is considering increasing the minimum age of marriage for girls in our country. In fact, the Women and Child Development Ministry had set up a task force to look into the correlations between early marriage, motherhood, and so on and so forth. Now, this task force did its own research. They suggested that we hike the minimum age for girls at least, and this is now under consideration of the central government. In fact, another committee has been set up to look into it, and a final decision will be taken based on the recommendation of this committee. So while on a national basis, on a policy on paper basis, we are looking at increasing the minimum age for marriage for girls from 18 to 21. What we are seeing on ground as we speak, that girls even below the age of 18 are being married off. An urgent intervention is required. Before we get into a conversation into the reasons behind it and how we fix it, here is a detailed report that our correspondent Disha got for us. She traveled into the interiors of Maharashtra, specifically to the Beed district, spoke to the families, to the officials over there. There's a report she got for us.
Lockdown has brought an economic crisis, resulting unemployment in lakhs of people. And in rural areas, a fallout has been resurgence in child marriages. The lives of young children have been impacted for the worse, specifically during lockdown here in the state of Maharashtra. We all know that child marriage is something which is not new. It's been going on for decades and decades. But the lockdown has made it even more worse. The cases of child marriage have doubled, specifically from few districts of the state.
As
As families reel under poverty due to lockdown, 17 districts have reported a staggeringly high number of child marriage cases in Maharashtra. Bid remains one of the worst hit, where young girls aged between 12 to 16 have been married off to older men. Mirror Now met one such family in Vangi village, where they married off daughter just 2 weeks ago.
आई-वडिलांनी विचारलं मला, तू सहमत आहेस का? तर मी म्हणलं हो आहे, कारण आमची परिस्थिती एवढी शिकवायसाठी हाय स्टँडर्डला आम्हाला जायला म्हणजे जमतच नाही, कारण की आमची म्हणजे परिस्थिती तशी नाही. तर शिक्षण तर होणार नाही आणि कुठं शिक्षण होणार नाही, मग त्यांच्यामुळे ते मला विचारलं तर मग मी सहमत होते.
The 16-year-old is currently at her parents' house, and once she turns 18, she will be going to her husband's. In the meantime, she is brushing up on her household skills. She has completed her 10th standard exams and is keen on studying further. But all her expenses now depend on her husband. The teen's mother says due to financial distress amid the lockdown, they had to take this extreme step.
मजबूरी हमारी ये कि हमारे पास पैसा नहीं होता है, हमको बाहर काम को जाना पड़ता है, बच्चे किसके पास रखेंगे हम, इसलिए बाल विवाह करना पड़ता है. लहानाचे मोठे आता इथपर्यंत 15, 16, 17 लागलंय तिला, इतक्या वर्ष आम्ही सांभाळले.
According to the State Women and Child Development Department, this year the state has already witnessed 220 cases compared to only 120 cases of child marriages last year. Experts believe that the numbers are just the tip of the iceberg, as numerous ceremonies have gone unreported.
बीड ज़िले में हमारे पास हमारे जो NGO और हम जो काम करते हैं, हमने 57 चाइल्ड मैरिज रुकवाए हैं ये 3 महीने में. इसका मतलब है कि बहुत सारे ज़्यादा बाल विवाह हो चुके हैं और उतनी ही चाइल्ड मैरिज की हमारे पास इंफॉर्मेशन मिली. मुझे लगता है कि लॉकडाउन में एक तो लोगों के पास काम नहीं था और दूसरी बड़ी बात यह है कि लोग यहाँ पे जो हमारा समाज है वो लड़कियों को बहुत समझता है. लॉकडाउन में बहुत कम खर्चे में सिर्फ 2-2 कुटुंब में ही शादी हो गई, जैसे कि 5-10 हज़ार में भी शादी हो गई. उसके ऐसे अगर लड़की का मैरिज करना हो तो दहेज देना पड़ता है, बहुत सारा गहने हैं, कुछ सामान होता है, तो उसकी भी कुछ ज़रूरत नहीं पड़ी.
In one such case, the child helpline number received a call from a 15-year-old girl who was married off 3 months ago by her parents against her will. After she left her husband's home, her parents refused to take her back. She is currently staying at a shelter home.
3 महिने राहिले तिकडं नवऱ्यापाशी, म्हणजे नंतर पळून गेले. मला माहीत झालं तिथं जाऊन की मला 15 वर्षात मला लग्न केलं म्हणून. तिथं जाऊन कळलं माझं लय छोटात लग्न केलं म्हणून मी माहेरला आले. माझे पप्पांनी ते भेटायला आणलं, गेलेच नाही म्हणून इकडं पोलीस ठाणे आले सांगायला असं आहे म्हणून. अडचण आहे मला तिकडं, मी राहूच शकत नाही तिकडं मी, म्हणून इकडं आले पोलीसकडे.
The girl says she loves to read and write. In this shelter home, she has learned how to operate a computer. Her parents did not let her pursue further studies, and she could only study till the 9th standard.
Mostly the schools have closed. Even girls which used to go for some kind of vocational training or other training activities, that have closed. So girls have ended up spending more time at home. At the same time, there has been a dip in economic activity also because of this COVID pandemic. One good thing is that we are getting information now. This issue has been highlighted very well thanks to the media also, and efforts taken by our field level functionaries also.
Compared to the last 5 years, this year has seen the steepest rise in child marriage cases. The pandemic has exposed how much more effort needs to be put in the state machinery to curb this menace and protect children. With video journalist Sachin Yeram, Disha Shah for Mirror Now.
In fact, I just want to go across to Disha first, since she traveled through various parts of Maharashtra. She met people, the families, the girls themselves, and of course those who are working in that area to try and stop this and report it. Disha, are these people who live there or largely have migrated from bigger cities after the lockdown began, and what age are these girls?
Well, then firstly, most of the families that I met in the interior villages of the district, for instance, Bid and even surrounding areas of Pune, we saw most of these girls who have been married off, specifically during the lockdown, are aged between 9 to 15. That's the age group that, we have come across the cases. Most of them were not really comfortable speaking on camera because they know what they have done is wrong. Child bride or child marriage actually happening before 18 for women and before 21 for boys, that's something they know it's wrong. So most of them were not comfortable talking to us on camera. But these girls, they have those dreams, Tanvi, of actually studying further or doing something in their life. But lockdown has made the lives of these young children even more worse, and there are several factors. When we met the officials, when we met the families, there are 2 to 3 major reasons. Firstly, due to the lockdown, the schools were closed. So most of the time, the women and specifically the girls here, they spend time more at home. So there was this financial security, there was this, security for girls. We heard one of the mothers saying that if they go out and work, then who will look after the daughter who's staying alone in the house? So security is one of the aspects. Secondly, lockdown made marriages less expensive because there was a cap of, 50 people gathering. It actually made economically more viable for families to get their sons or daughter married specifically during lockdown without calling more people, without letting anyone know. So that was another main reason. Secondly, poverty. Because in lockdown, most of the families who live in these rural areas had no income, had no work, no wages, and considering they were into poverty, they thought of, marrying off their daughters so that, there is one burden less in the family. So that is the sort of statements that we have heard from the family. One of the mother we also heard saying that हमने तो 14-15 साल तक पढ़ा लिया, बहुत हो गया, अभी आगे जाके उन लोग की responsibility है. So these kind of, statements is what we heard from the family. So all of these are various factors, and most of it and the biggest of all is, uncertainty over livelihood, because they don't know lockdown is making things worse for them and what next. So all of these are various factors which has actually doubled the cases of lockdown, specifically cases due to lockdown of child marriages. So last year we only saw 120 cases, and this year till October we have already seen 220 cases, which is double. And most of these are the official ones. A lot of marriages have happened, nobody even knows of, not even the WCD or not even the child protection units which have been set up in each district. So a lot of cases have actually been underreported as well. So these are multiple factors that have been really going on, specifically in the rural areas.
All right, Disha, it's heartbreaking, but unfortunately this is the reality, and the helplessness of some of these families is something perhaps that, as a system, as a nation and a society, we also need to look at, and how we can fix that to begin with. Thanks, Disha, so much for bringing us this story. Girls as young as 9 years old, between the age group of 9 to 15, being married off. Some parents say they don't have the money to educate them, to even take care of them. Others say, who will take care of the girls while they're out working, trying to earn a livelihood? And of course, like Disha pointed out, another interesting aspect, that at this point, some are saying they don't even have to spend on a grand celebration, on a lot of jewelry, on dowry. And so why not just do it right now? Let's try and understand this better, and what could be possibly the steps to be taken. Good evening to Isidore Phillips, Director for Divya Disha, Charan Singh Sapra, spokesperson for the Congress Party, Charu Pragya, spokesperson for the BJP, and Mr. Prabhat Kumar, Head of Child Protection for Save the Children. Mr. Prabhat Kumar, let's begin with you. We've focused this special series beginning with this one part of Maharashtra, but several other experts we spoke to said this is also a reality we are seeing in many other parts of our country. Is this a growing concern that the lockdown impact is leading to a surge in child marriages?
Yes, means I would say, and I would also tell you that if what Disha just now explained from Maharashtra, same is more or less situation in mostly states that have high burden of incidence of child marriage. What COVID-19 or lockdown has done is it has exacerbated that. And I must also tell you that one of things why it is more important than ever is in last one decade we had made significant progress in terms of child marriage. Means there were 47% of girls who used to get married before they were 18, and now percentage had reduced to 27%, 20% point. Still, one in every all four girls get married before legal age, which is an important thing. And the biggest driver that we have seen for the marriage of girls in such situation, and there are several drivers, but two most important one are poverty and second one is education. And I must also tell you at Save the Children, we conducted a rapid need assessment where we asked these households what were top three challenges that you are facing. And one of the topmost challenges that they had said was the lack of the cash that they are having. Almost 80%, which means 4 in 5 households don't have cash to meet basic needs that they need at household. Almost 75% of them have said that there is loss of livelihoods that they are facing. And roughly 50% said that they lack food supplies that is sufficient to complete their month for household. So that's the biggest factor. And second, like I said, one of the biggest barrier for the girls getting married is education. And with the schools being closed, very few people having access to online education, which is being done. In similar survey, we saw that roughly around only 27% of household have access. And we know that within household, there is disparities that who gets the phone, be it boy or a girl, and then what kind of internet connection or electric connection we have. So if we see both of these things together, the livelihood and education has deterred, and it is really time for us to step up our efforts, address these two basic needs immediately for the children and particularly girl children, so that the progress that we were making on the issue of child marriage, we continue that momentum and we are able to achieve our targets by 2030, which in COVID-19 situation seems slightly difficult. But if we all make our efforts, I think we can do it.
So, okay, the larger insights and the stats that you've given us are also something that I believe is very important to highlight to people, that while we have made quite a bit of progress, so far until the lockdown hit us, we still have a long way to go. I mean, I'm still looking at statistics, though they are dated 2011, because that was the last census that we did, where within the age group of 10 to 17, for girls, almost 13% of them were married. Within the age of 18 to 20, 43% of them had been married. If you look at the same for boys, within the age of 10 to 17, just 5% in comparison to 12%, even though this 5% shouldn't happen, 5% of the boys had been married off. And between the age of 18 to 20, 11.2%. So there is a stark difference. While some minors, boys are also being married off early. It's a larger problem, obviously, for the other gender. That brings me to the question, what do we do immediately? Isidore Phillips, if the lockdown is pushing more families to take this decision and, pulling girls out of education, taking away their hopes and dreams about what they may want to do in future, what do we do immediately?
I think one, to recognize, because I think the biggest problem in child protection is if we do not acknowledge it, that it is happening, then we would not be able to resolve it or work towards it. Let's acknowledge that there is a problem, that yes, girls are getting married. Yes, the girls are getting more, their vulnerability has kind of increased more because of the pandemic situation. One, if we accept it, then we look for solutions. What are the solutions? Child protection also, unfortunately for us, you very rightly opened up the debate in terms of gender. You said about the boys' numbers and the girls' numbers. Very, very true. And as long as we do not bring this up for discussion, we are not going to be addressing it sufficiently. Because the child bride issue is not just about poverty. It is not just about education. It is not just about livelihood. The underlying current is about gender. And I think gender issue is a larger sociological issue, and it has to be addressed straight off, right into the head, right into the faces of people. And I think somewhere there we have done very little when it comes to seeing child bride or child marriage as a gender issue. A. Two, in terms of education, boys go to school, girls go to school. Here the schools are closed both for boys and girls, but the girls are getting married. So in other words, vulnerability, whenever we talk about child protection, we talk about vulnerability indices. Vulnerability indices is a population that is the most vulnerable. And if girl is the most vulnerable, the pandemic should have actually evolved, pushed us to come up with a whole safety net for the girls today. We have failed our girls now. Now I think we still have time. The schools are still not full steam. And the biggest fear, we have done a study in the slums with about 1,500 girl children and boys from the school. The startling fact is most of them are already into some form of employment. So how many of them will come back to school is the biggest question. So I think if at all there is an immediate action, an actionable step, I would say the actionable step is how do you bring all the children back into the school? That is action number one. Action number two, community level protection structures need to be strengthened. We have something called the child protection committees, the village child protection committees, the Basti child protection committees. And I think it's high time that the action will have to start there, because it is our girls, it is our children. How do you protect our girls? And I think the community is best placed to protect its own children. So how do you bring in the messaging there? Because you cannot have top-end solutions there. The solutions have to be bottom-up there, and we need to be able to accelerate and mobilize the communities at that level. One, bringing the children back into schools, especially the girl children. Two, mobilizing the child protection structures. And the third thing is, let us not cloud the debate with too many issues. Increasing the age of the marriage. Yes, we shall debate it a little later. Right now, this is the pandemic, unheard of, unseen of. There is an emergency. It is a child protection emergency. How do you respond? Responding would mean protecting the child protection mechanisms. Your child lines in every district in the country, how strong are they? How resilient is their responses? How effective is their responses? What do we do to ensure that they are strengthened? Is there a vehicle that is not available so that the response could be timely? Is there an information network that we lack? Because sometimes the rescue workers reach the place after the marriage gets over, after the marriage gets performed. So how do we strengthen the information system? Police has got this tremendous intelligence network. I always say how good it will be if the police intelligence network also looks at child protection issues. If there are marriages getting performed, if girls are about to be trafficked, boys are about to be sent into bonded labor, if that information also comes in, then we know our children are priority. Unfortunately, priority doesn't really translate there. And I think it's high time that we show priority in actions by the system.
Yes. Okay, fair enough. And the priority has to come from on ground, those deployed, the local administration, even the police department. And we have to move quickly, not reach there by the time the marriage is done or the wedding is done, because then it becomes an even more complicated case. So Charan Singh Sapra, let's begin with you, because we started off with the case of Maharashtra. Obviously it's an issue across the country right now. What is it that the state government is doing right now to increase the action on ground?
See, Tanvi, first of all, I would like to congratulate you for taking such a serious issue on a prime time. This is definitely an issue where not many people have thought about it. I feel the figures which you have shown are very, shocking figures that during this COVID-19 period, the child marriages have increased. I definitely agree with Mr. Phillips that the mechanism needs to be strengthened. We know the reasons why this has happened. Number one is poverty. Number two, lack of education. Then number three, the psychological thing that people in India generally they feel, whether they are poor or whether they are from middle class, they feel that girl is the responsibility of the other family from the groom side. And people, especially the poor people, they want to offload this responsibility as soon as possible. And during the COVID situation, where there were job losses, people have lost the jobs, they don't have money, and they found that this is quite convenient with less expenses. It is very economical to do a marriage in these days because less than 50% are required over there, and in villages not even 50 people are required over there. So I feel we know all the reason. We need to strengthen the system. It's not that Maharashtra Child Welfare Department has not looked into it. 214 cases in last 3 months. They have rescued the girls also from this child marriages. And this problem is not only about Maharashtra. I appreciate your reporter has done a ground report in Maharashtra in Bid area. But if you see the nationwide thing, the 5 top states are Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, probably Andhra Pradesh, Telangana. These are the topmost states. There is a big issue of child marriages in Bihar and UP also. It is a pan-India problem. I feel that's why the central government has also instituted a committee to revise the age of these girls. It is definitely a serious issue. Central government as well as the state government, we both need to look into it to work out a mechanism which will strengthen the system, which will strengthen these small level committees, the child protection committees at village level or the district level. They need to be strengthened. Like rightly said by Mr. Phillips, we need to strengthen the police system also. The police should also intervene immediately. All these precautions need to be taken. They have been taken. And I assure you that government will take it more seriously. And this is a very legitimate issue which needs to be looked into.
In fact, let me also quote statistics from another state, which was where also it was recently reported, and this study was done, by a daily a few months ago. In Karnataka, according to the Karnataka State Commission for Protection of Child's Right, between April to July, in just 4 months, there were about 107 cases which were reported. While previous year, in the entire year, there were 156 cases. And in 4 months, we had over 100 cases. So can you imagine the jump that we're looking at? And state after state, and if we add it all up together, like Isidore Phillips is saying, this is another kind of a pandemic, the kind that nobody is really talking about, but needs our urgent attention. So Charu Pragya, maybe we need to look at this part first, implementation of the existing law first, protecting and saving these girls first, educating these families or supporting them with whatever else is needed before we look at further improvement in terms of increasing the minimum age, which also at some point may be done. But the real law right now doesn't really seem to be protecting these girls.
Tanvi, we do such fantastic work on ground to bring about gender equality, but unfortunately, this pandemic has set us back on all accounts. When it comes to women's health, it no longer seemed important, and even simple things like sanitary napkins were not easily available to women because it was never listed or considered an essential commodity. Moving on to education, if a family has just one mobile phone, a girl would be the last priority who would get to use it for education. Employability has
Charu Pragya, we unfortunately have lost that audio line with you. We'll try and get you back, unable to hear her at all. Mr. Prabhat Kumar, if I can just get back to you on the aspect that was raised earlier, which is about immediate action and what the administration or the government's local officials and the police need to be doing. For example, one argument that was also given to us is that the police has been busy with so many other things, overburdened and overstretched, that perhaps some of these other duties have been impacted. So do we need to set up state, city, district specific fresh task force or committees to immediately look into this matter?
I think there are already structures that exist, so we don't need to set up a structures after structure. So whatever exists, we need to strengthen those structure. And when this report initially, when you were speaking about Maharashtra, we also saw there are some positive side how community and administration has been able to respond and prevent some of the child marriages. And that is same model we used to do in our field, and that is what needs to be prioritized. What needs to be done is have a strong community level vigilance committee of panchayats and village level child protection committees, and then they parallelly work with the law enforcement agency, particularly like a special juvenile police unit, or there are child marriage prohibition officers who are there as per child marriage laws. And that is what we need to set up: better coordination, better availability. The helplines are now functioning well, and that is what we need to see at district level. They are immediately responding. The awareness about the childline services we have seen in our own surveys have been very high now. Like more than 50% of children and their family members knew about the childline helpline number, and that is actually helping. So these awareness are there. They need to be backed up with coordinated action. I must also tell you that many of the child marriage cases that we have also seen and that has been prevented, the most important role that has been played is by the village level child protection committees. And this is what we need to strengthen, and this is what we need to focus. Then second level is the district level administration and the special juvenile police unit backing up and supporting these structure, reaching out in timely manner. That is second most important thing. I think it's also time that we must, with help of panchayat, try and mobilize and do robust campaigning, because that also plays very important role in curbing incidents like this. Because when the community level monitoring or community level bodies are strong, then there is peer pressure and the likelihood of child getting married or girls getting married is very low, and that is where we must be focusing on. But I'll also stick to the root causes.
Okay.
Means, how do we ensure the learning of the girl child is continued? If we focus on those issues, if we focus on the family getting access to social protection schemes and money at hand, so that they are not forced into getting a household member or girls getting married because there will be one less child to feed, as you said in the report, and we have seen at a couple of places. So we should not let those situations coming, and we must focus on the education and livelihood factor greatly.
Yes, for example, it may not strike a lot of people. I don't think I thought of it initially. But if for example, midday meals are stopped because the schools have been shut. Now, the states did provide for in many cases to say, we'll give you the money or we'll try and provide the food. But obviously, it's not worked on a larger scale, which is why some of the families have now resorted to these kind of options. Yes, Charu Pragya is back with us. Go ahead, please. We lost the line with you. Make your point.
My apologies. Yes, you're absolutely right. And I was also going to be mentioning the midday meal. So like I was saying, whether it comes to health, education or employability, girls have lost out on all these factors in COVID times. So I have 2 quick points to make. The first one is we have to work on a 3-point program. The first one is awareness, second is reporting, and third is rescue. And to keep these 3 points working efficiently and properly, we have to make sure that Prevention of Child Marriage Act is a truly secular act. What happens is, even though Prevention of Child Marriage Act is a secular act, there is also the Muslim Personal Law, which deems a a minor girl married if she is a Muslim and there is meher and both the parties have agreed to that marriage. So we'll have to make sure that secularism exists in a true sense. We'll have to make sure there's a uniform civil code, and we'll have to also start an awareness work, not just with parents, speaking to parents. We also have to go to schools and speak to young girls. We need to give them a phone number which they can quietly call if they feel they're being pushed into a marriage at an early age when they are unready, whether they're under 18 or even at times if they're over. I think the numbers are also going up because society is awakening. There is a lot of awareness now existing in a lot of areas. See, because you would traditionally think the Bimaru states would show the highest number of child marriages in India. It's quite the contrary. It is not the Bimaru states. It is actually states where we would think education is more probably than in some other states in the country. So it may be the reporting that is going up, which is showing us a bigger number. That being said, I think women empowerment has to be done from scratch at every single level, whether it is taking care of female infanticide, making sure the girls are going to school, their health is being looked after, their menstrual health is looked after, so on and so forth. So when the government takes a stand, when Modi ji talks about sanitary napkins, when Modi ji talks about, the mortality rate amongst the younger girls, all these factors will come into play, and the more pride we start taking in our girls and we start treating them equal to our sons, I think the cases of child marriage will also go down. We must remember it is not just an economic problem, it is also a social one.
No, yes, you're absolutely right. It's not just an economic problem, it's also a social one. It's also about how even now in many parts of the country, for the families, having a young girl at home is a big concern, is a big burden, whether it's their security, their own safety, their education, their marriage, and the money and the dowry that has to be paid directly or indirectly, all of that gets factored in, and that's a social problem at the end of the day as well. In all of this, the only thing we can expect is that at least the state governments wake up to this reality and sound off the alarm bells if it is required. Sound off the alarm bells in a manner that each district set up, each special task force, each police unit, each women and child development ministry, each women commission, everybody gets activated on this. We need to come together as a team, while as a nation we debate and how to go about increasing the minimum age of marriage from 18 to 21 for girls, just like it is for boys, and what's the connection between early marriage and motherhood and their livelihood and all of that. We first have to keep in mind that those who are between the age of 9 and 18 need to be protected. We need to ensure their education continues. We need to ensure that their avenues and opportunities, if they want to go out and work, that happens. We need to ensure that their families have enough confidence that they will be able to take care of these girls. If the schools shut down, if they have to go to work and there is nobody to take care of them, sending them off as a child bride isn't the solution. I hope that the central government also takes a note of this and comes out with a special plan in coordination with all the state governments. It's horrifying, the numbers that are emerging from some of these states. A big thank you to all of our panelists for joining us on this debate.